Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. Back again today doing another video. The subject of today's video is going to be on the New York Knicks and specifically a stretch of time for them between 2010 to 2014 where a lot of people thought that they had the potential to be a title contender, myself included. They had all-star in his prime in Amare Stoudemire. They added a superstar in the middle of his prime in Carmelo Anthony. On top of that, they had some pretty good role players around them, a defensive player in Tyson Chandler with them, and a lot of people just thought that they would be a really good uh, perennial contending team, and they didn't end up being that. They really had about one good year and not much besides that. So today I'm going to break down why they didn't succeed and basically just talk about the team during this era and some of the reasons for success and some of the reasons for failure. So the first season that we have to look at on here is the 2010 to 11 season. The Knicks had signed Amare Stoudemire during free agency. He was doing pretty well for the team, averaging 26 points per game. They had a plethora of good young role players. They had basically the starting lineup at this point was Raymond Felton, and then they had Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, rookie Landry Fields, I believe, and then of course Amare Stoudemire. And then I think sometimes they were starting Mozgov, and sometimes he was coming off the bench. But essentially, you had Stoudemire, Felton, Wilson Chandler, and Danilo Gallinari as your main guys. And so let's see here their stats for that season. When they were on the Knicks, so Stoudemire was averaging 26 a game. Let's see here. Gallinari was averaging 16, Raymond Felton 17 and 9 assists per game, Wilson Chandler 16. So those are some pretty good averages. But of course, as most people know, mid-season at the trade deadline, the Knicks traded away those three guys, Chandler, Gallinari, and Felton, along with Timothy Mozgov and Anthony Randolph, in exchange for Carmelo Anthony, Ronaldo Balkman, Chauncey Billups, and Anthony Carter, which a lot of people saw as a good trade and a lot of people saw as a bad trade at the time, considering the Knicks had some pretty good chemistry and had been doing pretty well for what people expected. So the Knicks brought in Carmelo, who was averaging 26 points per game. They brought in Ronaldo Balkman, didn't really play at all, and Anthony Carter didn't really play at all. But they brought in Chauncey Billups, who, while he was on the Knicks, averaged 18 points per game and 6 assists. So he did a pretty good job filling in for Raymond Felton. And they still had Landry Fields. So let's see here. Their starting lineup after the trade looked like Chauncey, Landry Fields, Carmelo Anthony, Amare Stoudemire, and then at center they had a few different guys starting, but Ronnie Turioff basically down the stretch took over the starting center role. So they had a pretty good squad at this point. Nothing amazing still though, just because they did have two really great stars in their prime and a good third supporting piece in Chauncey Billups, but he was pretty old. I think he was around 35. And then also this team really had no depth to him. Like their best bench player was like Tony Douglas, who did average 11 points a game this year, but besides that, they didn't really have anybody as I'm looking on here. They had like Sean Williams, who's really not that great of a player, and yeah, let's see here. Tony Douglas, Sean Williams. That's really about it for bench pieces for them as far as notable guys. So they really didn't have much depth whatsoever. When it came time for the playoffs, they had actually finished down the stretch with a 42-40 record. So with Carmelo Anthony, they had only gone 500 because they only had stayed 2 games above 500 from when they traded for him. So that slotted them in as the seventh, or let's see here, as the sixth seed in the East, and they faced the Celtics in the first round, who swept them. And the people weren't too shocked that the Knicks lost in the first round. After all, they didn't really have a good record. People thought that Carmelo and Amare were having a few problems adjusting to playing with each other because Amare was really liking the whole alpha dog scorer job that he had been given, but now Carmelo was taking that over, and Amare had to be a second option, which he didn't acquiesce to as well as people had hoped for. But either way, this was their first year together. People expected them to grow and improve as the years went on. Okay, so let's see here. The next season, 2011 to 12, was a lockout shortened season, but if you adjust the Knicks record to a full 82 games, you get them at a 45-37 record, which is again not great. If we're looking at the core here, we're going to be looking at the starting lineup, which this was the year of Linsanity, if you do not remember that, um, where Jeremy Lin just went crazy for the team. But the big addition besides Jeremy Lin was Tyson Chandler, who was a Defensive Player of the Year this season, and I believe an All Star, well, the next season. But this year, Tyson Chandler averaged 11 points and 10 rebounds a game. Carmelo averaged 23 points a game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Amare Stoudemire averaged 18 points a game and 8 rebounds. And then they had signed J.R. Smith as well, who averaged 13 points a game for them. And they brought in, um, Jeremy Lin averaged 15 points a game for them and 6 assists. So starting lineup, if everyone was healthy, the starting lineup was Jeremy Lin, Iman Shumpert, Carmelo, Amare Stoudemire, and Tyson Chandler. The main reason that this team only finished with 45 wins was because of injuries. Carmelo missed 27 games. Tyson Chandler missed 20. Landry Fields missed, or wait, actually, let me see here. Carmelo missed 9 games. Excuse me, I was forgetting that's a lockout shortened season. Carmelo missed 9 games. Amari missed about 20 games. They only had Jeremy Lin for about half the season. So they didn't have a ton of injuries, but Carmelo missed a significant point in the season when they were trying to make it like a playoff push, and he was out during that time. They did have Jeremy Lin, but it did set them back just a little bit. And then having Amari miss about 20 games hurt them as well, just because the chemistry kept getting disrupted. Like Jeremy Lin came in and was a big influence, but then like Amari and Carmelo came back and they didn't really know how to integrate Jeremy Lin when he had been like the first option, taking 20 shots a night. He had to get used to going back to taking like 11 shots a night, which he wasn't completely prepared for. But it went okay. They got to the first round of playoffs again, and they got absolutely destroyed by the Heat, losing in 5 games. So they lost 4-1. And really, again, it was a matter of like a bad chemistry because of injuries. The team had because of injuries to Amari and bringing in Jeremy Lin and J.R. Smith kind of late, and then Carmelo just not totally being himself, setting one of his lowest scoring averages, only shooting 43% from the field. They weren't completely themselves, and so they lost to the Heat. Also notably, Mike D'Antoni got fired this season, and they brought in Mike Woodson, who was a much more defensive-minded coach. Mike D'Antoni was a much more offensive, fast-paced, whereas Mike Woodson was like a let's walk it up the court and let's really dial in on defense instead. So that was really interesting to see for them. But yeah, somewhat disappointing season in that they were only the 7th seed and they lost in the first round again. So the next season is the season in which they experienced the most success of any of these years of this run. The team was second in the East with a record of 54-28. Carmelo turned in a great season. Amare Stoudemire actually was injured for most of the year. He only played 30 games, in which he averaged 14 points a game. J.R. Smith won Sixth Man of the Year, averaging 18 points a game and 5 rebounds. Tyson Chandler was an all-star. He had 10 points a game and 11 rebounds and 1 block a game. Carmelo averaged 29 points per game and 7 rebounds. Let's see here. Other notable people. They had let Jeremy Lin go in free agency, and they re-signed Raymond Felton, who averaged 14 points a game for them. And that was the main pieces to the team. So your starting lineup was looking like, let's see here. Raymond Felton, and then Iman Shumpert and Jason Kidd sort of were a rotating door at the 2 spot for the starting. And then at the 3, you had sometimes Carmelo, and then sometimes you'd have actually Raymond or Iman Shumpert start at the 3 because Amare Stoudemire was injured a lot. So Carmelo actually really benefited from getting to play the stretch 4 and getting to match up with slower power forwards because he was strong enough to be able to take on power forwards, but at the same time they weren't fast enough to keep up with him on defense. So that's really why he played well. Let's see here. And then, of course, starting at center, you had Tyson Chandler. And when he was healthy, you had Amare Stoudemire at power forward. And then JR off the bench. So, to me, the big key for this team was that they improved defensively and that they had Mike Woodson as their coach, really emphasizing the defensive end of the court. And they really played the style of basketball that is the best style of basketball to play with Carmelo Anthony, which is give him a ton of shots, make the whole offense about him, and anybody else who happens to score, but everything goes through Carmelo. They didn't really have that those first 2 years that he was in New York because they there was this sort of feeling that him and Amare were like on even ground as far as ability and level of player. But then I think clearly this year when Amare got injured and even when he was playing wasn't doing all that well, it was clear that Carmelo Anthony was going to be the alpha dog for the team. Um, but yeah, Tyson Chandler really stepped it up on defense, and they had an okay bench, I think, as I recall. They had Chris Copeland, who was pretty good off the bench. They had some vets like Kenyon Martin, who they signed for the stretch run of the season, and Kurt Thomas and Rasheed Wallace, and Marcus Camby. Those are all some pretty good guys to have coming off the bench, just as a veteran presence for younger guys like Copeland and Shumpert. So, oh, I forget, they also had Steve Novak, who shot 42% from three and only played about 20 minutes a game, but was a really good sniper for the team to help spread it out on offense. So they had a pretty good squad this season for sure. Carmelo actually finished second in the voting for MVP behind LeBron this year, receiving one first place vote and preventing LeBron from becoming the first unanimous MVP. But that's more of a side note. Getting into the playoffs in the first round, I believe let's see here, they played as the seventh seed, I believe. I don't remember who the seventh seed was, but they handled them pretty easily. And then in the second round, they played the Indiana Pacers, who people thought that they would likely beat. They actually lost to them, and as I recall, really Carmelo showed up and scored I think around 25 points per game, but really just no one else showed up for the team. Tyson Chandler averaged like 7 points per game in that series. Raymond Felton averaged the same amount, around 14, but then nobody else really contributed and everybody shot really badly. J.R. Smith only scored like 12 points a game in that series, I'm pretty sure, if I recall. Amare Stoudemire didn't play, so um, and then like Steve Novak shot poorly, so they just had a combination of like a lot of their guys were really streaky scorers, and in that series Indiana was really good on defense, so the Knicks struggled heavily on offense. And Carmelo, despite him liking the style of just give the ball to me and I can do it all myself, they actually did struggle with that in the playoffs because it's not like he can take 50 shots a game. Just a side note for the season, I didn't really cover injuries, which is something that I covered in other seasons. But um, so Amare Stoudemire missed 50 plus games. Carmelo missed 15 games. Uh, Tyson Chandler missed 16 games. Raymond Felton missed 14. Iman Shumpert missed about 40 games. So they had some key injuries on this team, but overall they were pretty healthy, and people thought that they would continue to be a playoff contender over the next couple seasons. So the next year, 2013 to 14, they brought back most of the same squad. They had drafted Tim Hardaway Jr. and let's see here, they still had Tyson Chandler, still had Amare, still had JR, still had Carmelo, still had Raymond Felton. Big changes were, as I said, Tim Hardaway Jr. And bringing in Andrea Bargnani. So Carmelo averaged 27 a game and 8 rebounds and played basically the whole season. Tyson Chandler missed 27 games, but he averaged 9 points and 10 rebounds a game. Raymond Felton played 65 games and he averaged 10 points and 6 assists, so he fell off pretty big, shot below 40% from the field. Tim Hardaway Jr. averaged a good 10 points a game off the bench as like a sixth man. J.R. Smith started half the season, came off the bench half the season, averaged 15 points per game, only shot 41% from the field though, so his shooting dropped off a bit. Amare played 65 games but was still nursing injuries from the previous season and really hadn't become fully himself again. He only averaged 12 points a game and 5 rebounds, so he was struggling a bit. Andrea Bargnani started in place of him at power forward for about half the season. He averaged 13 points a game and 5 assists on 44% shooting, which is actually pretty decent for him. So overall, I think just this season, you didn't really have a healthy Amare. You had a Tyson Chandler who was in and out of the lineup. Raymond Felton fell off a cliff really. You just had basically everybody playing a little bit worse than they did the previous season. And for that reason, I think, well, especially Amare Stoudemire fell off a cliff. Raymond Felton fell off a cliff. JR was still good, but he wasn't shooting it as well, and he was averaging 4 points less per game. Tyson's numbers were down. Everybody's numbers were just down, and it's not completely explainable, but I don't think Amare. I think Amare's athleticism was a little bit zapped after the previous season, almost missing the 50 plus games. He just wasn't the same player coming back, and I think the Knicks were really built around this idea of having um, him be like the second option, and so without him, they were like forcing. J.R. Smith was kind of forcing it this year because he knew he had to be the second option, and so that wasn't going great. And they finished 37 and 45, and then the season after is when Amare left and Tyson Chandler left, and I believe Raymond Felton left, and then J.R. Smith was traded as well, and the team basically just disintegrated into a 17-win team after that, and Carmelo's career basically faded into obscurity. So if I had to nail down the main reasons that this team didn't reach their potential, so number one, I would say it was hard for them to gel from all the constant player fluctuations. Like in their first year with the trade, it was hard to get chemistry down. The second year, because of so many uh, injuries and lineup fluctuations, with JR being signed halfway through the year, and same with Jeremy Lin, they just didn't have the chemistry down again because of injuries and lineup substitutions. So their third year, the reason that they lost to the Pacers in the second round, again, you could factor it to not having Carmelo or not having Amare Stoudemire, so they were missing their second best player at the time. Then also all the guys shrunk in the biggest moment because they're all streaky shooters, so that impacted them as well. And then the third year, kind of this inexplicable fall off from everybody. But if I had to pin this franchise down to like three reasons why they didn't succeed, I'd say one, uh, constant injuries and lineup changes, so they never could really get like a consistent team on the court ever, really. Number two, I would say Amare and Carmelo really just didn't have much chemistry as teammates, so they were supposed to be a two-headed monster, each scoring like 26 points per game, but that just never really happened because they didn't know how to coexist in that offense together. And then number three, I'd say they just had a super streaky players in general, like guys like J.R. Smith, Jeremy Lin for a time, Carmelo even, J.R. Let's see here, Raymond Felton, all just really streaky players, so it's hard to get consistency in that regard. So that's the entirety of this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a good day. Leave a comment below if you have anything to say about this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.